I'm really happy to introduce Dr. James Cusack, and he's a Director of Science from the research charity focused on autism, which is called Autistica. So I'm going to invite James now to share his screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see that.
As Emily says, I'm James. I'm the Director of Science at Autistica. So I'm the Director of Science at Autistica because my background has been in autism research, and so I did a PhD up at Aberdeen Uni, and I've been involved in a lot of policy discussions in Scotland and now down in England around how we can ensure that research makes the best possible difference for autistic people and their families. Prior to that, as a child, I was diagnosed with autism. I'm also a parent, working from home with two kids, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I just mention that just to make it clear that I have some understanding of the challenges that presents. So obviously we're delivering this presentation. What I'm aware is a challenging time for everyone, and it's challenging people in different ways and to different degrees. And I want to acknowledge from the beginning that the consequences of this are clearly very, very profound and also hard to generalize as well. So yeah, I hope that I can make that clear throughout. So before we go into what we have learned so far from the COVID-19 crisis, I thought it'd be useful to set some context around what do we already know. And what did we know before going into this crisis, and what might we expect on the basis of that knowledge? I think the first thing that we all know from research and just life and from working directly with autistic people is that autistic people can be very different from one another, and although there are commonalities and there are common experiences, there's no one rule. And I say that from the beginning to say that I am aware that some of the things that I might suggest might not work for everyone, or it might not be right for everyone, but these are some general trends and findings that we're seeing, and some things that we think might be quite helpful for some autistic people. And so I'm aware that there'll be varying levels of relevance. So to start with some of the issues that we'd expect autistic people to face, we know that one of the first things that COVID-19 as a crisis presents us all with is a fairly dramatic change in routine. And so we would expect that change in routine would be particularly difficult for many people on the autism spectrum and their families, and communicating those changes and on the underpinning reasons why this is happening is something which we would expect to present many challenges and in very different ways. And so we're very aware that the movement from schooling from home is going to be particularly challenging as well, amongst many other changes. The other issue that we'd expect to be challenging is one around anxiety and mental health. And so we know that prior to this crisis, that autistic children have a high prevalence of difficulties, particularly around anxiety. Almost half of autistic children have some sort of form of difficulty relating to anxiety, and we know that these issues are very, very prevalent throughout school life. We also know that this is a difficult time for parents, and we would expect this to be particularly difficult for anyone who's a parent. But if you're in a position where you feel that your child has specific challenges or difficulties, obviously the challenges here are going to be particularly acute. And we also know that the types of anxiety that people are going to face are going to change very much from person to person. And we also know that there might be some protective factors, and so we know that some of the experiences that people are having right now might remove some things which cause stress in the lives of autistic people. So maybe not being in a sensory environment, which is as challenging, so being from home and having more control over those things, or having interactions which are difficult. And although that's not the same for everyone, it's definitely something that we've been hearing an awful lot of. And I say these things to not undermine the issues that people are facing, but just to reflect the range of experiences that we're hearing from. So in terms of how people are feeling, one thing that Autistica has been doing is working with its insight group to try and understand the range of experiences that people are having right now, and that's to really inform our response to this crisis and to try and do what we can to ensure that people feel as supported as possible. And I guess what we've found so far when we've spoken to parents and adults has not been hugely different to what we would expect to see in people who aren't autistic in the general population. So this is around 20th of March when the lockdown happened, and what you can really see here is that people are feeling quite a lot of anxiety, concern, worry. Some people feel calm and some people feel relaxed about the situation. I think we heard from a lot of people who reported to having a lot of emotional ups and downs day to day. Few people saying that their anxiety was sky high. Difficulties with sleep. Some people who are saying they quite enjoyed the lack of social contact. Other people who found the whole thing quite isolating. Definitely one thing that we heard a lot about was children feeling quite uncertain, quite worried, and a real feeling of a need to information gather and try to understand more about this in an effort to try and gain control. And so what we've been doing is maintaining a dialogue like this through a survey every week with our insight group every couple of weeks. And so this is where people were by the 10th of April. And I think what you kind of see here is a bit more of a movement towards feeling there's still anxiety there, but there's also a sort of acceptance of the situation. And this is, again, what we've sort of seen. I sense from my conversations with other people in the general population. When we've spoken to people, there's definitely a sense of boredom creeping in. Some people finding that they're able to get into a routine, whereas other people are feeling quite exhausted from the anxiety that this crisis is presenting, and some of the uncertainty, and definitely some frustration coming through as well. And so I guess it's this sort of move from feeling anxious to having more of a depressed mood is what ultimately we're seeing when we were consulting with our insight group. So one thing that we've tried to do in response to this is try to provide information and guides which can help people. And so this is really focused on key issues. And so I'm not going to touch on this for too long because I'm aware that Jonathan's going to talk in greater detail and provide more practical advice. But just to say that we've produced a guide on uncertainty, and hopefully that can help you to understand some of the different ways in which you can manage that, and how things like mindfulness and having a structure and time and place to manage these different types of anxieties and to share those anxieties in a constructive way is really, really important. And then the other thing we've focused a bit on is building routine as a family as well. So just sharing some of the things, and again, these are generalizable to people who aren't autistic as well, but just, as parents, as we all grapple with this, it's understanding that, home is not school, but people still need a routine, and working together in manageable ways to try and ensure that there's a way to provide some predictability into the day as well. And I guess one of the final things which we've been really trying to emphasize to parents and carers is that you're not alone in this. There's a lot of people who are going through this experience, and to be kind to yourself as well, because this is obviously very, very challenging, and we can't, we've got to have reasonable expectations of ourselves. I just wanted to finish with a little bit of hope on this front. This is a profoundly affecting situation for everyone, but the world will change after this, and we will find ways to adapt to the crisis that we're currently in right now. And some of those ways of adapting could really, really be positive for autistic people. So first of all, the experience that the whole general the whole of the country is going through should, I hope, build some empathy with some of the experiences that autistic people are having right now. So I think a lot of the population are finding a lot out about what it is to feel uncertain, to adapt to new social norms, to find new ways to communicate, to build new routines. And although this is not exactly the experience that autistic people have, hopefully it builds some empathy and shared understanding on that basis. Hopefully it will open schools' minds in terms of being more accommodating to different ways of learning for autistic children, and providing digital support, which I know Jonathan will touch on again later, and maybe more autism-friendly ways of doing things, such as running events. So the last thing I want to say is we do need to plan for the medium to long term in terms of dealing with the needs of autistic people and people with associated conditions like that. I think it's really important generally that we think about the needs of children, their development, their health, their well-being, and that we need to make sure that as this crisis evolves and as we move out of lockdown, hopefully in the next month or two, that we have a plan in place to really support autistic people and those with a learning disability, and to try and think about the key issues now and how we all adapt and plan for those, because really that's pivotal in terms of meeting the needs of everyone. So I've obviously only got 10 minutes and I want to make sure that I stick to time. We have lots more resources on our website. So we've got some webinars which are up on YouTube as well, but we've also got some evidence-based guides or some practical guides from professionals as well, which I hope can really be informative for you as well. We're also working with the National Autistic Society, so we're trying to make sure that what we do is complementary with them. So if you just Google coronavirus autistica or coronavirus National Autistic Society, hopefully you should get some really useful information.
Thank you very much for joining us for this recording from one of our Emerging Minds webinars focused on how we can best support children and young people during this time of COVID-19 and what research can offer us. We are planning a range of webinars and you can find details of those on our website. And please do also get in touch to let us know what subjects are on your mind and what you'd like to focus on next. So a quick word about Emerging Minds. We're a research network funded by UK Research and Innovation, and members come from all sorts of disciplines and sectors, but we're all working towards reducing the prevalence of mental health problems experienced by children and young people. We really invite you to get involved, so please do sign up to keep in touch with our newsletter via our website, or keep in touch on social media, for example, Twitter. We also wanted to talk to you about a survey we are running at the moment called CoSpace. So we want to learn how families are coping with the challenges of COVID-19. So if you're a parent or a carer of a child in the school years from 0, so reception and foundation, to 11 in the UK, please do consider taking part. And your responses will really help us to find out how children, young people and their families are getting on, what's working for them, and how we can best help. Please do also spread the word to your networks and colleagues too. You can see there some of the findings that we've shared so far from the study, and on our website you can find resources particularly for parents and carers and people that work with children and young people, like the one here on the screen about supporting children and young people with their worries. Thanks again for listening, and we hope to keep in touch with you. All the best.